Okay to laugh about it a little bit here and there. And I want to talk about that for a second. Be real frank about that. I know why you guys are here. Okay? I know why you're here. And you know what? I've been traveling all over the country, and Alaska's my favorite place. A lot of people there show up, but we're all here for the same reason. It's because we know in our gut that something is horribly wrong. You don't have to be told. Nobody told you that something was wrong. You know, because you have a heart and a spirit and a mind that's perceptive to those things. And you got a sense, and you know when something bad is going on. And I don't know about you, but well, I think I do know about you, but I'm going to tell you how I feel anyway. The way that I feel when I look around at this current debacle that we have and that's been building for years and years is I feel like there's just this huge power out there that's just incomprehensible, even to think about influencing it, let alone stopping it. And all I want is just to be free and to respect other people and have them respect me and to be protected by the law and do what I want, you know, and have freedom. That's all I want. And I don't know how to argue that from all the nitty-gritty statutes and everything like that. And I don't understand all the ins and outs of this giant monster that's coming our way and bulldozing over our freedom. But I feel in my gut a resentment, and I think that you identify with this, that you shouldn't have to understand all that stuff. You shouldn't have to understand all that stuff. And that our rights are rights, and we shouldn't have to buy our rights with hassle. We shouldn't have to you know, combat this giant monster with all this specialized knowledge and all this money and you know, win and get our rights. You know, you hear about these guys that fought the IRS or fought the ATF or anything like this, and they're like, yeah, I beat them. It took me 30 years and $17,000. And you're like, that sounds like a prison sentence. 30 years and $17,000. You know, who's the real winner here? You know, they got you. They just got you the other way. You know, you might have won, but you were dead right. That just makes me sick, and it makes a lot of people sick. And we know that our nation, you know, we feel that it's getting wobbly, and it's worrying us. We see this looming power. We see these videos like we saw today that they can just lock you up for any reason without a phone call or nothing. You just disappear. And so we show up here. Why? Because we don't know what else to do. And what we get told so many times that feels like you got kicked in the teeth with a government-issued boot is all you can do is you can beg the tyrant to change. You can commit your life to a long, slow drudge uphill to try to reform this monster. And your heart just sinks. You're like, oh gosh, is that really the price of freedom? Is that our only chance? Is to try to make go to Washington? What if I ran for office and I got elected, and I could go there to Washington where I can't have a gun, and try to be a good influence on tyranny? You know, and people think, oh, it just makes your heart sink. And we come to these meetings. And we leave here with this list that goes down to the floor of things that you can do, you know, and well, you keep begging them, and you can keep kissing the ring, and maybe they'll hear you if there's enough of us. Well, you know what? That doesn't really resonate with my spirit. And I can't really come out and say there's anything wrong with that stuff. But I tell you what, it doesn't make me jump out of my chair either. And I want to tell you, I just am really excited to tell you some pretty unconventional but pretty cool stuff that we've been pioneering in Alaska. Actually, you know what? We're not pioneering it, because people throughout all of human history have done this. But we're pioneering it in human memory. There's nobody alive who really remembers this, at least not in this country. And I can't wait to get to that. But first I want to hit a couple of points about this giant monster that we're trying to reform, okay? I want to explain how it works and how they got us. So I'm young, I got good eyes, I can read my notes down there. All right. The first thing that we're up against that we've got to understand our enemy. And you got to, be honest about who your enemy is. And that is anyone who would take away from us the freedoms that God gave us. Anybody who, when you ask them what their authority is, their only answer is because I said so, is tyranny, and that's our enemy. We've got to recognize that. Now, that puts a lot of people in our enemy category, but you know what? That's okay. Let's first talk about the money situation. This is the main tool of tyranny. And this all comes down to legal theory, which I'm really excited to talk about, because that's how we got so far off base in this country. All right? So that's what really allowed the monetary debacle to be here. But we got to understand the monetary debacle because it's the main tool. It really is the teeth of the beast. Here's how it works. All right? The Federal Reserve, which is not federal or reserve, it's just like a cooperative of private banks that are named after their best customer. Okay? They are allowed to print up money out of thin air, just print up trillions of dollars out of thin air and loan that to the government, to the federal government, with interest. That's a pretty good gig for them. They print up dollars, thin air, loan it to them at interest. We pay the interest. That's what our income tax is for, which was passed at the same time, 1913. On Christmas Eve, there's question even whether there was a proper quorum. It was really shifty, and they kind of duped Woodrow Wilson into it because he was dupable, and they got it passed. Now, here's why that's so bad. You might say, well, what's wrong with them printing up money out of nowhere? Well, here's how it works, okay? Dollars respond to the law of supply and demand, just like everything else does. When the number of dollars in existence goes up, the value of each one of those dollars goes down. Now, the value lost by the dollars that you held, or the retirement that was in a fixed dollar amount that you're counting on, or whatever, the value lost by your dollars is value transferred to whoever printed the new dollars, whether they're a counterfeiter or a federal government. That's why the Constitution says that no state shall make anything but gold and silver coin a tender in payment of debts. That is brilliant. You know why? Because you can't churn out gold and silver coins on a printing press. We would be better off even if they just actually printed them. They don't even actually print them now. They just email them. They just hold down that zero key until they've got enough money, and then they just send it off. And enough value has to be robbed from our dollars that we worked hard for to make that email worth something, that they send to authorize people to spend those make-believe dollars into the economy. Now, what those dollars do is they go out into the economy, and they bid up prices. So when people talk about the national debt, and they're talking about this is something that our children are going to pay, that's not really quite accurate. Our children and our grandchildren aren't necessarily going to pay that. What that's going to do, they're going to rack up print up a bunch more money. It's going to destroy the value of the dollar. It's going to take more dollars to do the same amount of work. Like I said, that law of supply and demand. And prices are going to rise accordingly. And so when a Big Mac is $35, you're paying the national debt. Does that make sense? It's pretty sneaky. If they tried to raise taxes to match their spending, they'd have had a revolution a long time ago. But this is a way that they can tax us without us seeing it, because the way it works is if they send you a bill, if you've got $100,000 in the bank, and they send you a bill for $30,000, 30%. Ooh, ouch. You've got to write them a check. But here's what they can do. They can, instead of sending you a bill, which you'd be hot and bothered about, they just print up the money, and they reduce, they get that money, and then by them expanding the money supply, everybody's bank account, the purchasing power, not the dollars, number of dollars in there, but the purchasing power of those dollars is reduced by 30%. So, whether you wrote them a check for $30,000 or you had everything that's out on the market go up by 30%, they still robbed you of the ability to redeem your labor for a valuable good or service that you want. That's how they can tax you without you seeing it. Now, not only does this system weaken the individual in order to strengthen the federal government, but then here's where it gets really bad. They take that money and they turn around and they offer it back to the state or the local governments with strings attached. They say, the feds, with this stolen money from you, they say, we will give you this money if you will do this to the people in your state. And they say, okay, we'll do it. Now here's the principle. You work for whoever signs the checks. Now what this does is this is like a wrestling move where you change from being a republic to being an empire. In a republic, the people are at the top of the food chain, and the commands roll downhill from the people on down to the government, you know, and God gave every human being the right to life, liberty, and property, and a corresponding obligation to defend those rights as an individual and through the establishing of governments to do the same. So it's only reasonable that as a government gets further and further removed from those people, their power subsequently diminishes. That's how it works. That's the logical chain of command in a free society that's operating under the sound reasoning and rule of law. But you get that money flow reversed, where the Federal Reserve can take it right away from you, give it right to the feds. Boom, we're not a republic anymore, we're an empire, where the chain of command follows the flow of money. And all of a sudden, the most far away, the most distant, the most inaccessible to us of the governments is now on top, rather than us. And so what it basically is, to boil it down into real simple terms, is the government is robbing you and giving the state and local government a cut to cooperate. And they have figured out, and they do this in other countries too, watch it. They do it to us and they do it to other countries. They don't roll in here and try to boss you around and tell you how you're going to run your life. No. They buy your friends and make your friends do it. They buy our state. They bribe our state away from us and make our state do it. They give our sheriff's department a bunch of federal funding. And then when we go to the sheriff and we say, hey, sheriff, we elected you. You are very close to the source of authority, which is us. We want you to protect us from anybody who's going to trample on our rights, no matter what they call themselves, no matter how they're organized. We want you to do that, all right? And he says, ooh, I don't know. Those people you want me to protect you from make up a pretty considerable portion of our budget. And so you've got this sheriff with torn allegiance, because we're no longer a free republic. We're a monetary, inflationary empire. Does that make sense? Is that, you got that? That is huge. We've got to understand that. They've gone to great lengths to hide that from us. Now, I could go into, in fact, I will, because I want to be fair to the other side, even though I think it's totally bogus and you're going to hate it after I tell you. John Maynard Keynes, who was the socialist guru of the 50s, who was a big advocate for this inflationary system, what he said is, he said, yes, I know that when you rob this money from people and then spend it back into the economy, yeah, it hurts them. But you know what? Overall, in general, it's good for us, because the end justifies the means. And here's why. Because we take that money from them, and then the government spends it into the economy, and what that does is that creates a frenzy of activity, and more people pile on, and what that does then is it gets everybody all jizzed up and making money and working hard, and the end result is better. The end result is the average person is better off than if we hadn't robbed it from them and give the top another spin. That's the Keynesian model of economics. That is almost, get this, that is almost exclusively what they teach you in business school. And guess who funds business school? Guess who funds the educational, system? Is those fiat dollars. Of course, they're not going to, bash their method of funding. Now, just real briefly, what that actually does is it doesn't create investment. When the government robs from you and spends it into the economy, it creates malinvestment, because it is investment that has sprouted up around a artificial influx of government dollars rather than a natural demand in the market. And so people build their life and their business around this influx of government freshly stolen loot. And that stolen loot is fickle, and it goes from place to place. But when they inject it into the economy, it creates a bubble, a stock bubble, a housing bubble, a tech bubble. All these bubbles that we've had, you can trace their funding to injected dollars. Now, why is this good for politicians? Because they can inject it where their friends are. They can inject it to where they need votes. They can inject it to where they need donors for their campaign. This is why the politicians like this system. So you get a bubble, and then they get caught between a rock and a hard place, and you get foreign holders of dollars getting mad because they're making their dollars that they're holding worth less, and so they pull the dollar hose out of there, and the bubble starts to go down. That's a recession. You know what they taught me in high school, in the high school textbook? I was homeschooled, but they taught in the high school textbook, depressions are causeless anomalies. End quote. That's what they taught us. That's FDR, okay? This is the monetary system, okay? I've spent enough time on it. That's all on that. The next thing that we got to understand about how our system works is that, you know what, our senators and our congressmen in Washington, they're not nearly as powerful as you might think. One thing that I've learned from dealing with government and talking to these guys and trying to get down to the nitty-gritty of why can we not be free, why can we not do this, is they are afraid of the agencies. They're afraid of the IRS, the ATF, the DEC, all these other alphabet soup agencies, because what you do is you get this kind of a separate animal from government. In our government, we're supposed to have the judicial that reviews and applies, the executive that implements it, and the legislative that writes it. And what you do is you get an agency or a bureau. What the heck's a bureau? We had ATF come to one of our meetings like this. We had 1,000 people, and we asked them, "What's a bureau?" They didn't know. I said, "Well, do you know what an agency is?" No, they didn't know that either. Well, we got the Internal Revenue Service. What's a service? They didn't know that either. We got the Transportation Security Administration. What's an administration? What are these things? Certainly you know what you are. They didn't know. We called the agencies and the services. They didn't know either. I don't know. I've worked here for 30 years. I never thought that question. It's like they were like Dilbert, They worked there all this life in this cubicle, and they don't know why or what they do. They didn't even know what those words meant. But I think there's something big under there with who they're accountable to. And I think we got to dig that up. And I've been trying, but it's buried deep. I haven't found it yet. When it is, I'll send you an email. When I find out what a bureau is, I'll send you an email. Anyway, these bureaus and all these things, these animals, we don't know what they are, these unidentified species of government, they consolidate all three functions of government into one. They create regulations that have the force of law. They have their own enforcers that come out and kick your door in to make sure you're doing it. That's a legislative function to make the rules. It's an executive function to kick in your door. And then when you get dragged out of there with zip ties on your hand, you go before them. And you have a judicial function. Then they review it themselves with an administrative hearing. That is the consolidation of all three of those powers. It's a loophole. It's a way to get around the checks and balances. And it's so entrenched, and it is so powerful in this government that we've got, that our congressmen and our senators are scared of it. And you know what it's doing to them? It's making their role of writing legislation almost purely ceremonial. They're kind of just a dog and pony show. And we've got to realize that there's this other creature of government that wasn't intended by the founders that's coming right into our life. We've got to reckon with this. This is some hard, bad stuff. Here she's like, "Oh, you'll be so happy when you hear this guy." Mona says, you know. And here I am talking about all this horrible stuff, you know. I see your face is dropping, you know. Kicked in the teeth, you know, he says a minute ago, and then he does it. So the other thing that you can do is you can appeal to this government based on the rule of law, okay? You can call them on the carpet. You can go before a court. You can make your case based on logic. You can make your case based on the Constitution and have it all ironed out and all perfect. And you're appealing to them on the merits of law, and they won't hear you. Here's the way it'll go. We just got out of Continental Congress. The main reason that we were there is because we're being denied redress of grievances. What'll happen is you'll have a really sound, bulletproof, constitutionally based case, and you'll start fighting this case, and you'll start getting up through the tiers, you know, up there, and you'll get up to the Ninth Circuit Court. You guys are in the Ninth Circuit Court. It's horrible, I know, because Alaska's in the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals too. You'll get up there to that Ninth Circuit Court with your case, and you want to go all the way to the Supreme Court and have this settled. And they'll say, we're not going to hear your case. Well, why not? And they say, well, because you don't have standing. Oh. Well, why don't I have standing? Because we're not going to hear your case. And that's what they say. That's not an oversimplification. That's what they say. Next, please. And that's it. And you know why that is? You know why they operate that way? You know why you can have the whole Constitution and the 16th Amendment, and you can prove how you know the income tax was never ratified and how it's unconstitutional and it was a temporary war measure. You can have all of these laws out here, you know, all right? And you can fight it based on all of these laws. And I know that there's some people in this room that have fought it based on those laws, you know, and you know what? There's way more people that haven't fought it based on those laws. And let me tell you why you didn't fight it based on those laws. Because our government does not operate under the rule of law. They operate under the rule of force. It's not the rule of law, it's the threat of force. That's what it is. You know how the Oxford English Dictionary defines terrorism? Government through intimidation. That is profound. Now, how many of you submit because you're intimidated? And how many of you submit because you really think the law requires you to do that, and that if there was a discrepancy, you could bring it to them and they would abide by the law? No, I submit because I'm scared, and I'm not too usually of a scaredy guy, you know? But that's what it is. We don't operate under the rule of law. We operate under the rule of force in this country, and that is pathetic and sad. And let me tell you what my most profound fear is. My deepest fear is that our government is not going to hear us until we speak to them in their language, which is force. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean violence. And don't get me wrong, I'm not against violence. I'm not against violence, okay? I'm not against spilling blood for freedom. I'm not against, I will kill for liberty. You know, everybody asks, would you die for liberty? That's not really the right question to ask. The right question to ask is, would you kill for liberty? Because if you would kill for liberty, it assumes that you would die for liberty. All right? Now, about this speaking to them in their language, force doesn't necessarily have to be violence. It can be just pushing them into submission to the law through nonviolent means. It can be hassling them into such a rock and a hard spot that they just got to do something. But we might not even have to do that, given what I'm going to, keep talking about here. Now, the other thing, I keep saying second thing, like 20 second things. I couldn't count the other night, you know. They were like, and the third thing, and the fifth, and everybody correcting me on the counting is like, you're missing the point. I didn't come here to count. I came here to give a big idea. It can be packaged up in any numbers you want. And so anyway, forgive me on that. Here's an idea that, you know, you feel a little bit like you're going out on a limb to say this, or at least I do anyway. But you know what? I really believe it's true. And while I feel like I'm the first one to run out onto the, you know, field of battle with a, you know, storm hell with a water pistol to say this, I think that you'll know that it's true in your heart. I don't think that we can beat them at the polls. Now that might sound very defeatist, but let me tell you why. Because you can't overcome votes that are bought and paid for with money that was stolen from you. And they know that. And they know that all they have to do is steal enough money from a broad enough base and give it to just a big enough base to secure their reelection. They've figured it out. They've refined it over the years. And you know what they do? They just keep sending us back into that fruitless eddy of vote them out. If you're mad, vote them out, you know? And then they go behind their closed doors, they snicker, and they go, ha, ha, ha. They'll never be able to overcome all the people that are dependent on the money we rob and give to them. And as long as we keep them just focusing on this one single recourse of if you don't like it, vote them out, they'll go in circles for forever and we can keep this gig going for years. That's what they say. In fact, I've been there for some of those, you know? And it's just, and then you're like, hey, guys, this isn't right. And they're like, look, buddy, you're out of the club, you know? That's the way it goes. So that's why you feel this way. That sinking feeling in your gut that you felt, you've all felt that, right? I've felt that. The sinking feeling in your gut is the expected feeling when somebody says, go do this thing. And you've never put, you know, that's impossible, this impossible task. You know, it's like, oh, there's a freight train coming. Let's all dive in front of it. Maybe we can stop it. You know, that's kind of, it's like, oh, I know it's not going to work. They transferred out the FBI and U.S. Marshals out of Fairbanks, and they brought in 6 federal agents just for me and the militia. Now it's their policy, and it's not just something that they kind of let under the rug, it's their written policy that anytime there's a group that might weaken or disturb the powers that be's you know, control over the people, that what they'll do is they'll come in and they'll try to provoke an incident that would then make them appear justified in bringing the whole group down and just disrupting and splintering the whole thing. So that's what they did, and first thing they got to do is they got to start out with character assassination, because if you kill the man before you can name, then you'll just make a mark. So they started out with that, and that caught us totally by surprise. And then, let's see, I had I think 6 or 7 actions going all at the same time, and then they just finished it all off with, I just got a tax audit now. So it's they're really coming at us. Started out with these charges with me and my wife, and then they followed that up with another felony charge of unlawful contact. I got an attorney who's a friend of mine, and he was just baffled. He just didn't. He's like, I don't know what to say. This is not. None of this is typical. I'm kind of confused. I got to call somebody, figure out what happened. None of this is in the ordinary.
And that's when you went to that house?
What house? Oh, no. This is okay. 2 weeks later. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
This was all in about the span of 3 weeks. We just sort of got jobed, all at once. But it was good. It was a blessing. I don't know if it was in disguise, but it was a blessing. So then we got all these charges pending. First one gets dropped in 3 days, but makes headlines all over the country and all over the world. Okay. Second one gets just held for a month or two and then gets dropped. Then we respond to a Liberty Bell call where this lady's got cops coming in her house, and she said, you can't come in. And,
right.
and she said, well, go get a warrant. I said, we're coming in anyway. And she said, well, I want some witnesses around here because I got a feeling that you're not following the law. And so everybody shows up there, you know, that with the Liberty Bell. Works great.
Now, the Liberty Bell, in case somebody doesn't understand what that is, if they don't know, what is it?
The Liberty Bell is an automatic phone network that we have in town here with about 6,000 to 7,000 members in it. And anytime that somebody gets in a situation where they feel like their rights are being violated and they'd like to have some witnesses around, then they just call the Liberty Bell operator.
Mm-hmm.
And the Liberty Bell operator message instantly to all those people that so-and-so could use some witnesses at whatever address. And then if you're around in the area, then you just stop by and just get your cell phone camera there and just kind of, you know, watch what's going on, and it just keeps everything on the up and up. And it's just done some really great things. And this time it was doing great things because they didn't have a warrant and they just were kind of being defiant, and you know, they need to follow the law. So got arrested there, and the cop comes behind me, puts my hands in, grabs my hands, and man, they teach them the most horrible, like, voodoo grips. I'm gonna have to learn some of those. That was a good trick. And I said, well, am I under arrest? Didn't arrest anybody else or hassle anybody else. I said, well, am I under arrest? And he said, yeah. I said, well, what for? He said, I don't know, I got to go look up some laws. And it's on the recording too. That's the funny part. Huh. So we there's that, and no charging document. Went to the arraignment. The DA went ballistic, wanted me to be court ordered to not do any more public speaking, not hold any meetings, or stop operating the Liberty Bell, and just went off the deep end. But there were so many people there that there was enough pressure that they didn't. It would have been too embarrassing for them to go that against the laws of this nation to do. So they didn't do that. But then, and
now when you say they, who are you talking about?
I'm talking about the judge and the prosecutor and all the state folks.
Mm-hmm.
Well, they're not even really state folks, which is another thing we figured out, which is, I think, one of the reasons that we're in such great danger right now. So then, shortly after that, we get a knock on the door at our house, and all the while, we don't know what's going on. We don't know where this is all coming from. But after the fact, it turns out that there was these 6 federal agents up from Aurora, Colorado, that came up here just for this purpose, that were just pushing all this stuff. You know, if they can't lock you up in prison, they'll tie you up in court. And we've been building enough momentum, and the biggest thing that we've been doing that's been so powerful is education. Is just teaching people about the law and about what the Founding Fathers envisioned and about your rights, that those come from God, and we establish governments to protect those, and that's the only job that they can do. Just teaching people, and we've been just turning out these courageous folks. Mm-hmm. And that's dangerous, you know? Ideas are a controlled substance these days. So anyway, it's these agents pushing this. So we get a knock on the door, and these people are at the door, and they say, we're here to get Seth Cox. That's our 1.5-year-old, our little baby. And they say, we're gonna take him and check him out. And you know, all this stuff, just one after another, all these attacks are just coming from every direction. And so you know, of course I'm not going to cooperate. I know they're up to no good. But I said, well, you know, what am I going to do here? So I thought, well, you know, Obi-Wan Kenobi did this one time, and it worked. So I went, I'm not the man you're looking for. And they just turned around and left. No questions. I'm not the man you're looking for. And they just walked away. So right then, Marty and I left the house and started living in safe houses, running from these people. You know, this is all just politically driven, you know, mischief. And it turns out at the end what had happened is those federal agents had filed a complaint of child neglect. And their basis for that was a picture on Facebook of my little boy on the living room carpet playing with ammunition.
I mean, just those staged picture, you know, just playing choo-choo chains with ammunition in an ammo can. Oh, isn't that cute? You know, take pictures and then we put it up, you know, never too early to start them, you know, up on Facebook. And then, so then they use this as a basis to,
How did they, or they get them
on
off
Facebook, they
yeah.
can just go in. I
Sure.
think the FBI thought up Facebook. I think that they invented that to get us to all just put that stuff out there. So anyway, now they're going after our baby, and we're running from them. And of course, our first inclination, which is I think mistaken, is if you've got nothing to hide, then and you're not doing anything wrong, then you've got nothing to hide. Okay, the honest man has something to hide from pirates, and when they're acting like pirates, the honest man needs to hide. So our first move was, we said, well, we would love to come on, do an interview, sure. And we said, but we want our attorney to be there. And they said, oh, no, can't do that. We said, well, then we want it videotaped. They said, no, there can't be any records made of this. And this is the Office of Children's Services saying this, that's being pushed by the feds. And so we said, well, you guys are up to no good. So that's the end of peace negotiations now. You know, this is ridiculous. And so we just quit cooperating with them entirely. So then they went to a judge and got a writ of assistance, which is, by the way, the thing that started the Revolutionary War, was writs of assistance. And they took it down there to the troopers, because these federal agents, in order to orchestrate an event, they have to have some degree of local cooperation. And they took it down there to the troopers and was trying to get them to, you know, serve this writ and come kick in our door and take our baby away from us, just in case, just so they could check him out, because he might be neglected playing with ammunition on the floor. And so they take it down there to the troopers, and the troopers say, well, we don't have the manpower to safely execute this writ, and we're not going to have anything to do with this. And they said, well, what are you talking about? Why? And they said, well, we're afraid that there would be counterattacks from the militia within hours if we did this, and we just don't think we're totally in no way prepared to deal with this. And it probably also helped that a lot of those troopers know us, know Marty and I, and that kind of a thing was met with a high degree of suspicion right off the bat. I think that helped probably more than we know. But anyway, come to find out, what the supervising agent had said, the words that came out of his mouth, quote, like verbatim, was this: our plan is to try to take Seth away from Schaeffer and Marty, and we believe that will be sufficient to elicit a display of force, at which point we will shoot all three of them. Now they needed some cooperation to get this showdown on the road. And naturally, if there's a big shootout with me and all of this movement that's picked up all of this momentum, then it would probably, you know, fragment and splinter that. But you know what? God took such good care of us this summer, and we should be dead right now if it wasn't for His provision. And like that we read in the Bible just a minute ago before we started, that though your enemies are camped around about you, that He will deliver you, and that you will not be ashamed, and that you cry out to Him. We saw that. Not only did we see it, we felt it in an amazing way. And it wouldn't be right for God to take such great care of us in the face of such horrendous wickedness, and for us to not proclaim the mighty protection that He put all around us. Mm-hmm. There were so many miracles that kept us safe. People at all levels of government broke ranks and risked their own jobs and their own livelihood to help me and Marty. People stuck their neck out there. It got so bad that the Fort Wainwright commander told Marty and I that we could have political asylum on post, because these guys come to town and they're trying to get people to cooperate with this big plan to get a shootout, and they started catching on, and their consciences came through.
There's nothing to do about those guys. Couldn't they kick them out?
No, and even like really high up, powerful people. And this is one of the problems that we've got, Dick. There's this this kind of a charade government, but then there's like the boots on the ground real government that's just totally unaccountable. And the other thing was they were DEA agents, Drug Enforcement Agency. Now, I don't even drink coffee. I've never so much as smoked a doobie in my life. I've never even been around drugs at all. And so I was baffled initially. Well, why do they have Drug Enforcement Agency coming after me and Marty? It's because every time that they bust a drug dealer, they get to just keep that cash. And so they have this huge cash under the table budget, and they can go around doing things that would get a tremendous amount of scrutiny if it showed up as a line item in the budget. I mean, kill a young couple and their baby doesn't look good going through the Congressional Budget Office. And so they do it with this cash. Now, there might be people out there who are not believing this. And I totally understand, because you know what? I was fighting against this kind of corruption, and I still didn't quite believe it. And you know why I didn't believe it? Because I didn't want to believe it. I wanted to not believe it. Because if this was true, it meant that things are way worse than I had ever imagined, that hard times were ahead. It would have popped my bubble of delusional bliss. It meant that I would have a moral obligation to roll up my sleeves and cry out to God for deliverance and undertake the ugly task of opposing this, rather than just, sitting on my hands singing Kumbaya. So that's our summer. We spent our whole summer running from these guys. Eventually what we did is we went into court. The judge wanted us to go in for a secret court, and we said, forget it, we're not going to do that. And I sent the command staff down there, and they said, no way, you want to meet with Schaeffer, it's got to be public. And we went down there, and we didn't say a word about the law, we didn't say a word about, or it's a pretended law, nothing. All we said was, look, this is looks like a politically driven attack, and there is no sense starting a war over this, and we just want to live at peace with everybody, and that's, I'm sure, what you guys want. And these guys will come to town, they'll start this big hullabaloo, and then they'll just fly to the next town, and we'll be left here with town torn apart. And so we just made an appeal to the sensibility of the locals that we don't need to fight with each other. And these guys are trying to get us all revved up for a cat fight, and it's insanity. And we said, Judge, we don't want a war. But if you want a war, we've got one hell of a war with your name on it. But if you want peace, that's what we want too. And the judge said, well, that's very encouraging. And the Attorney General said, we'll get this to go away. And that was the end of it. We haven't heard anything more. So we kind of won that battle because of God's grace, but now they're still here in town. And we just decided that now it's time to just quit, being silent about this, and especially to point out God's mercy. And you need to hear from Marty on that. Do you have a question? Did you have a question?
Well, the question is how many people are in the militia? Kind of goes away from our.
Yeah,
but that's right.
That's okay. There's about 3,500 in the militia in the whole interior. Now there's different levels of active and inactive, and different levels of training, but there's about 3,500 guys. We've been working on this for about 3.5 or 4 years, and the whole goal and purpose of that is defend all, aggress none. The whole idea is to get to know your neighbors, and if things fall apart, then the good Fairbanks folks can pull together and hold it together. Because
it's not a malicious militia.
It's not a malicious militia. No.
Right.
It's.
But there are some of them out.
There definitely are, and there's there's trigger happy cowboys in the militia that we have to kick out, because that's not what this is about. If you're just wanting to keep your family safe and live at peace with people, then this is it for you. But if you're angry and wanting to go pick fights, you're not welcome here. But there's trigger happy cowboys in the federal government too, and you've got these guys in the militia that just want to fight. Not in our militia, because we don't let them stay in there. You've got these guys that just want to fight, and then you got these feds that just want to fight. And there's no point in fighting. If we all just respect each other's rights, then we can all get along and be fine. So we're not going to aggress anybody, but we're also not going to tolerate any aggression from anybody. I mean, it didn't come to it, but, and I'll say this on, I mean, they got my phones tapped, so they know I'm saying this, so it's nothing new to put out on TV. If there came a time where they were endangering my family, you bet I'd kill those federal agents. And what kind of a father and husband would I be if I wouldn't? Would I sacrifice my family on the altar of submission to the wicked state? No, that would be despicable. We would highly criticize anybody who did that, stood by and watched in history. And we've got to reckon with the fact that that's our time right now. Now, we had those agents, with 3,500 guys, we got tremendous resources at our disposal. And we had those guys under 24-hour surveillance, those 6 trouble causers that came up here from the federal government. And we could have had them killed within 20 minutes of giving the order. But we didn't, because they had not yet done it. And it's not right. They're people too. And they've got just as much ability to repent as anybody else. And there's no sense in it. Now, how they rationalize what they do is between them and God. I don't think it makes any sense. But we want to have forbearance and patience and peace towards all men, and everybody. But God's grace and His providence has just been amazing. It was really hard on Marty and I, being uprooted and getting smeared all over the press and having these people hunting you down, and new mother and just a little baby and living from house to house, with just a rifle and a sea bag. But at the same time, I think God was teaching me personally something there, and that was to hold all my possessions and my home and my personal peace with an open hand. Because when you just run off and leave your home, your house and your business and everything, and you just run for your life, what's the verse that says, head for the hills, and if you turn back for your cloak, you're going to die? Well, that's what it was like for us. And these folks were in hot pursuit. And that really taught me the value of my wife and my family and God's provision. He gave us everything we have. And He can take it away and instantly give it back again. And we're A-okay in the midst of that. That's something that we had to work through together as a couple, And Marty's got 3 points that are on that topic that she was going to share. So I'll let her.
Go ahead.
Well, 3 points that we were talking about in the Jeep. We were like, well, there's so much. There's such an abundance of information and facts about what happened this summer that it was like, well, we need to narrow it down for time's sake. And we were bouncing it back and forth to one another, and we decided that, the first was that you see these things happen to other people, and you're like, wow, that's kind of messed up, that's screwed up, and you have inklings of, well, this system might not be perfect, there's some corruption, but you don't realize how corrupt it is and how really the enemy uses this system to wage war against God's people. And you don't realize that until it kind of comes barreling down on you. And that, it really struck home with me. I knew that things were screwed up and that the system was corrupt, but it wasn't until they came and attacked my family needlessly and just really were seeking to steal, kill, and destroy that which God sought to bless, that I started to realize how corrupt it really was. And once you see how corrupt it was, once I was in it, it was like, wow, how are we going to fight this? How are we going to overcome? It felt like we were outmanned, you know, the federal government seems so huge. Their resources seem, you know, unmatched. And it was like, how are we going to win this? There's no way that we're going to be able to make it out of this, at least in one piece. You know, we might make it out alive, but is our family going to make it out in one piece? Are we, you know, is our child going to be safe? Is he going to be taken to some other home and taught lies about his mother and father? And so out of that, I had to come to a full realization that God was the ultimate warrior. You know, just as Joshua led the people of Israel into the promised land, God commanded him to be strong and courageous, for he was going to be with them. And he was the one who won the battles, and he was the one that fought. And he only required his people to be faithful to his word and obey him. And you know, and then David really spoke to my heart, you know, reading about David and realizing that here was a man who made mistakes, who was, you know, who was sinful just like we are, but who was a mighty man of God, and who was a man after God's own heart. And it was because he had faith. He believed that God was going to be the one to save him and uphold him and deliver him. And the Psalms just became living bread and a refreshment and encouragement to my spirit. And really, that is what sustained me, was God's word and his promises in the word that he is going to deliver his children from evil. And you know, there's just so many specifics, you know, about the snares that the enemy puts, you know, at our feet, and God puts our enemies in those snares, and how our enemies use deceit and lies about us to try and make us look a certain way so that we're abandoned by others who would want to help. So, you know, it's just over and over and over in Scripture. It just showed that the enemy does seek to destroy God's children, but because we are his children and because God is righteous and faithful and loving. Now, you know, we made it through the battle. The biggest battle was with OCS, trying to keep Seth safe from, you know, maybe well-intentioned, but people who didn't understand, who thought that it was their place to take care of our son, the son that God gave us to protect and make sure he was safe and nurtured. And
by the way, OCS kind of got suckered into it. You know, once OCS figured out that the whole thrust of this was the feds trying to, now OCS as a whole is wicked and vile and horrible and should be, you know, thrown in the garbage can. But there were some good people in there that once they figured out that they were being used to start a shootout, they were backpedaling 100 miles an hour. So, like, kudos to them for, you know, they might be confused about whether children are property of the state, but they're not nearly as sinister as those agents that came up here that were just trying to start a shootout. And they, you know, started backing off. So just to put a point of clarification there.
Yeah.
For that.
Yeah. They were definitely in all areas, you know, in all the different areas where we were being attacked or where the enemy was trying to use them as instruments to come against us. There were good people who listened to God when he poked them, you know, to do something. They obeyed, and it was because of their obedience that we experienced his protection and his provision. And but you know, we won the battle. God won the battle for us, but the war is still waging. The enemy is still out there because of, perhaps even because of the victory. He is the ultimate enemy, Satan. You know, he's not going to just let us go. If he knows that God has great things for us, he's not going to stop waging the war. And the war is waging. There are more battles to be fought, and we're still fighting battles, and we're still having to rely on God's protection and provision. And we're seeing that every day, and just so thankful to him, and so thankful for the prayers of others during that time. We had people that we know specifically of who were praying for us, and I know there were many others that we don't know about, but the battle truly is won on our knees.
Amen.
It's
true.
Our battle is not against flesh and blood, although often it seems that way.
Okay.
If you've been hurt or wronged in any way, that can be changed. We need to talk about jurisdictions. We need to talk about what's proper and how we got here. We did a lot of research this last summer, and we came up with some amazing stuff. So people need to know that. We need to get together. We need to hang by one another, because let me say to anybody out there, if you are going through something where they are aggressing you and abusing you, you call me, because we will help you. Because after what happened to us this summer, we take our duty very seriously. And it's not just me, but it's all of the people involved in this. We will help you. And you need to be on your knees praying to God, because He is our deliverance. But we also need to stay together and sharpen one another and edify one another and take care of each other. And I just reach my hand out to any of you that are in that spot, and thank everyone who reached their hands out to us when we were the object of the aggressive despots that are the powers that be.
If somebody wants to get a hold of you, who do they call? What's the number?
Well, you can Google Schaffer Cox and sort through all the trash and get my phone number somehow. Or you can just you can dial 590-9903.
Okay,
That's
590-9903.
Yep, that's my cell phone number.
Okay.
And I'm easy to find and hard to catch.
All right. Well, it's good to hear your testimony. Appreciate that. Very good. Yes, sir.
I misspoke that email address for the website. It's republicoftheunitedstates.org, republicoftheunitedstates.org, and please click onto the History tab. It's all verified and documented evidence.
Okay, and then the 1st of September, what time?
December.
1st of December.
7 o'clock in the evening at the Carlson Center.
That's the Carlson Center.
Yep, we're going to be there. We're going to lay out all the evidence, and then we'll probably just kind of present it to some of these folks and say, look, it's kind of time for you to shape up. We urgently need diplomatic relations to develop between this out-of-hand powers that be and the people who are getting fed up with it. Because if we don't establish those diplomatic ties, we are going to result with blood just by default. And I don't want to spill anybody's blood, and I sure don't want to have any of my blood spilled or any of my people's blood spilled. And there's no reason for it at all. It would be insanity for us to do that. There is no reason. And so people need to listen to reason and avoid that. We can all live it. There is no reason that we shouldn't all live at peace, but we've got to establish diplomatic relationships between the powers that be that are out of hand and the people that are here that are fed up.